He arrived ready to lead the most important tech gathering of the quarter. He had the keynote. He had the contracts. He had the entire summit depending on him. Yet the first thing he heard was a sentence he had not heard in years. "You need to wait outside." That was the moment everything changed. Not just for him, not just for the hotel, but for everyone who would soon hear the story. And before the morning was over, an entire company would learn what it cost to underestimate the wrong man. This is where it began. A few minutes before 8, Ken Turner stepped out of his dark blue Infiniti sedan into the driveway of a high-rise hotel in downtown Oakland. The sun had just climbed over the neighboring buildings, throwing a soft glow across the pavement. His suit was a charcoal gray with clean lines and a weight that showed quality, not flash. His tie was narrow. His shoes were polished by habit, not vanity. Everything about him said purpose. The valet didn't move. Ken held out his keys, waiting for a simple acknowledgement. A nod, a step forward, anything. The valet glanced at him once, then quietly shifted his attention to the car behind Ken. A silver SUV rolled up with a louder engine, and the valet pointed at it, waving another employee over. "Can you take this one?" No greeting for Ken. No eye contact. Just dismissal, so casual it almost sounded normal. Ken lowered his hand with the keys still in it. He didn't sigh. He didn't react. He walked across the driveway and parked his own car in a side lot without a word. He had learned long ago that silence was sometimes the sharpest response. When he stepped into the lobby, the air inside felt colder than outside. A woman at the front desk raised her head for half a second, smiled, then let the smile disappear before the moment could settle. "Can I help you?" "I'm here for the Summit Link conference," Ken said. "The Redwood Suite should be reserved for us." The woman studied him the way someone studies a stranger who might be lost. "Do you work with one of the vendors?" "No, I'm the CEO." A brief blink, a tiny frown. Then her eyes went back to the screen. "Right? Well, we're still preparing the space. Could you wait outside for a bit?" Ken held her gaze. "I'm also the keynote speaker." No apology. No sudden realization. Only a strained smile. "We're not ready. Please wait outside." A man in a navy blazer walked up behind her, clutching a walkie-talkie like it validated his authority. He ran his eyes over Ken's suit as if checking for a badge. "You with security. My name is Ken Turner. I run Summit Link. The conference you're hosting today is mine." The man nodded slightly, but not with respect. More like he was trying to confirm a suspicious detail. "Just give us a minute, sir. We'll call someone to get you." Ken breathed in slowly. Measured. Controlled. People were filtering into the lobby now. Investors. Partners. Guests with badges hanging from their necks. One man, wearing a plaid suit that must have cost less than his confidence suggested, walked in and was welcomed like old family. Staff rushed to shake his hand, guided him through the lobby, asked if he needed anything, offered him coffee. No one told him to wait outside. He walked past Ken with a nod, so faint it could have been accidental. The hotel doors closed behind him with a quiet thud, leaving Ken once again outside. He looked down at his watch. 8:09. He had more than 40 minutes before his speech, but something inside him hardened. Not anger, not shock, something colder. He remembered moments like this from earlier years. Times when he doubted himself. Times when he wondered if success would change the way Room saw him. Times when he learned the answer. His phone buzzed. "Boss," said his assistant, Riley. "They greet you yet?" "Not exactly." "What happened?" "They asked me to wait outside." Riley didn't gasp, didn't scramble. He knew that tone in Ken's voice. "Wanting to come down." "No, stay with the investors. They'll be arriving soon. I'll handle this." Ken slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked through the doors again. The same woman noticed him, but didn't alter her expression. "I thought I asked you to wait outside." "And I waited. Now I'd like to speak with the event coordinator." "My name is Ken Turner. I'm the founder and CEO of Turner Innovations. We booked the Redwood Suite and 2 full floors for our guests." This time she paused long enough to register that the name might matter. "Turner, was it?" "Turner." She nodded to the man with the walkie-talkie. "Called Jessica from events." As he walked off, a bellhop passed with a luggage cart stacked with conference materials. Ken saw 2 members of his advisory board stepping out of the elevator. They wore their badges proudly, shaking hands with a manager who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Ken lifted his hand slightly in greeting, but the manager didn't break his conversation. He simply turned away. "Ma'am," Ken said softly, "let me repeat this once more. I'm not a guest. I'm not security. I'm not delivering anything. I'm the reason 60 of the most influential investors in Bay Area tech are standing in your building today." She opened her mouth to speak, but the man in the blazer returned. "She's on her way." He looked Ken over once more. "You really the CEO?" Ken gave a small smile. "I didn't just build the company. I funded it. I wrote the code. I signed a contract with this hotel. I chose this venue because I believed professionalism mattered." For the first time, both employees fell silent. Not amazed, not apologetic, uncomfortable. Before they could respond, Jessica from events rushed into the lobby with a folder under her arm. "Mr. Turner, I'm so sorry. No one told us you'd arrived. Please follow me. Everything is ready." Staff stepped aside quickly, making room for him. Ken walked forward without a word. He didn't need to say anything. He had given them space to correct themselves. They chose not to, and what came next would stay with them longer than any apology ever could. But this was only the beginning. Part 2 will continue directly from here. Ken followed Jessica down a long hallway lined with framed artwork and quiet carpeting. The hum of distant conversations floated from the conference wing. He could hear investors settling in, unaware of what had taken place minutes earlier. He didn't slow his steps. He didn't look back toward the lobby. But the weight of what had happened stayed close, sitting just behind his calm expression. They reached the Redwood Suite. Lights dimmed. Rows of chairs set. Coffee already poured in neat white cups. People greeted each other, shaking hands, chatting about market shifts and new projects. No one looked toward the door. No one realized their keynote speaker had been told to stand outside like a lost guest. Ken scanned the room once, then stepped into the private lounge reserved for speakers. He shut the door gently and pulled out his phone. "Tammy," he said when his operations lead answered. "We're moving the summit." She didn't gasp. Tammy had learned long ago that Ken never spoke without purpose. "Right now? You want to relocate more than 50 guests with less than an hour's notice?" "Yes. Start with the Glenview Hotel down the street. Tell them it's urgent." "You want me to cancel everything here?" "Cancel all of it. If there's a penalty, put under my name." No argument. Tammy paused to make sure she heard him right. "Understood. I'll start calling." Ken ended the call. No emotion. No hesitation. He simply acted. He had built a company on precision. This morning would be no different. A soft knock came at the door. Riley stepped in with a small notebook in hand. "You want to run through your slides, boss?" "Plans changed. We're leaving." Riley raised an eyebrow. "Already?" "They didn't even try to fix it," Ken said. He didn't have to explain more than that. "I'll tell the board," Riley replied. "No, I'll speak to them myself. You handle the guests. Make sure no one thanks the hotel on their way out." Riley nodded and slipped out, already tapping messages into his phone. Ken stepped back into the Redwood Suite once more to gather his notes and laptop. An older hotel manager appeared, walking straight toward him with a tight jaw and a folder clutched in hand. "Mr. Turner, I've been informed about the misunderstanding earlier. On behalf of the hotel, I want to apologize. It was never our intention to offend you." "You didn't offend me," Ken said. "You disqualified yourselves." The manager blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "We want to make this right, sir. You had your chance." Ken didn't raise his voice. He didn't slow his pace. He simply zipped his laptop case and walked out of the room. The manager stood frozen, a man watching the end of something he didn't fully understand. Outside, the quiet wave had begun. Riley whispered to one group, "Emergency relocation. Please gather your things." To another group, "We have a better setup. Follow me." Investors didn't question it. They saw Riley's calm. They saw Ken's direction. They trusted the leadership more than the venue. Within minutes, people were moving. Chairs scraped softly. Coffee cups were left half full. Lanyards swung as guests stepped into discreet clusters heading toward the exits. Meanwhile, Tammy had already secured the Glenview's grand atrium. Staff were preparing. Audio equipment was being rerouted. Catering was redirected. Logistics were shifting with speed that only a well-trained team could achieve. Back at the first hotel, confusion spread like a silent alarm. The front desk woman stared at her monitor. People were checking out. canceling room keys, leaving without explanation. The manager was interrupted by call after call. This guest isn't attending brunch. Another one left without notice. Someone said to talk to Mr. Turner if there were billing issues. Housekeeping called about suitcases that didn't match the reservation list. Security asked why 3 black SUVs had pulled up and taken guests away. The manager tried to control it, but the damage was already in motion. There was no argument to make, no speech that could reverse what had been lost. At the Glenview Hotel, Ken stepped into the bright atrium. Staff recognized him immediately and greeted him with clear respect. No hesitation, no confusion, no questioning whether he belonged in the space he had built. He walked toward the assembled crowd. They were waiting. They trusted him enough not to ask why they had moved. They knew something had happened. Before we begin, Ken said, I want to thank all of you for making this transition so quickly. He kept his voice steady. No bitterness, no anger. Where we gather matters, not because of appearance or convenience, but because it shows what we value. A quiet ripple moved through the audience. I chose the previous hotel for its reputation, but this morning I was reminded that a polished building doesn't guarantee respect. He let that settle. I was told to wait outside, twice, by people who never asked my name or my purpose. And in that moment, none of the work, none of the planning, none of the responsibility mattered to them. Some listeners looked down, troubled. Others sat straighter, recognizing the deeper story behind his words. But I'm not here to shout, Ken said. I'm not here to shame anyone. He paused. I believe in moving forward. And today, we're doing exactly that. Together, in a place that sees us clearly. The room applauded with genuine respect. That applause traveled further than they knew. Because only a few blocks away, the first hotel was quietly unraveling. Conference signs were being pulled down, and used catering trays sat untouched. The Redwood suite echoed with silence. Staff whispered to one another, piecing together what had happened. The manager received a notice from Turner Innovations. The contract was terminated, effective immediately. No lawsuit, no debate, just a clean break, and a costly reminder of what they had ignored. Meanwhile, Ken moved through the Glenview with a calm presence. He didn't boast. He didn't recount the insult in dramatic detail. He simply acted with certainty, and the consequences followed naturally. Word of the relocation spread fast in business circles. A tech blog published a brief write-up. No accusations, just facts, a timeline, a decision, and that was enough. Over the next few days, 3 other companies canceled events with the original hotel. Quietly, strategically, no statements, just a simple message. We decided to move our business elsewhere. Inside private meetings, executives said exactly what they meant. We can't be tied to a venue with that kind of oversight. What's our backup location? The hotel tried to repair its reputation. A regional director reached out to offer free stays, upgraded suites, and special packages. Tammy didn't forward the message. She didn't respond. She simply marked it as handled. Trust wasn't a coupon. It wasn't a discount. Once broken, it was gone. But while the hotel scrambled, Ken was already thinking ahead. The next challenge, the next conversation, the next lesson, and one more person was waiting to learn it. Ken followed Jessica down a long corridor lined with framed cityscape photos. Each step he took felt heavier than it should. He wasn't angry. He wasn't flustered. He was focused. They reached the Redwood suite. Inside, chairs were arranged in clean rows. Sound equipment was already humming. The scent of fresh coffee drifted from the back table. Investors were drifting in, greeting one another, oblivious to what had happened minutes earlier. Riley stood near the podium, checking audio levels, giving Ken a small nod when their eyes met. Ken didn't walk to the stage. Not yet. Instead, he entered the quiet side lounge reserved for speakers and closed the doors softly behind him. He stood still for a moment and finally exhaled. Then he picked up his phone. Maya, he said when his head of operations answered, we're moving the event. Right now, she asked calmly. Right now. That's more than 50 people, Ken. Then we move 50 people. This place has shown us who they are. Where do you want a conference relocated? The Harbor Grand. They're only 8 blocks away. They've handled us well before. Got it. I'll get their coordinator on the line. Anything else? Cancel everything booked here. All suites. All services. If they want to fight the penalty, charge me personally. But do not keep us in this building. Understood. Ken ended the call. He stared at his reflection in the dark window. He wasn't proud. He wasn't triumphant. He was tired. Tired of being the one who had to rise above the same pattern. Someone knocked on the door. It was Riley. You want to run through the slides? He asked. No changes to the slides, Ken said. But the plan is different. Riley's eyes narrowed, then widened. We're leaving. Yes. They didn't even try, did they? No. Wanting to tell the board. I'll tell them. You get the guests moving. Keep it discreet. No speeches. Just direction. Got it. Riley slipped out the door and began whispering to small groups through quiet nods and handshakes. Emergency relocation. Better set up nearby. Wait for instructions. Meanwhile, Maya had secured the Harbor Grand and was redirecting staff, security, AV equipment, and catering. Her messages came through in rapid but controlled updates. Every team knew what to do. Ken walked back into the Redwood suite once more to collect his notes and laptop. The tension in the room was shifting as people quietly gathered their belongings. A manager approached Ken, clutching a folder so tightly his knuckles were pale. Mr. Turner, I heard there was a misunderstanding at the front desk. On behalf of our hotel, I want to apologize. We never meant to cause offense. You didn't offend me, Ken said. You disqualified yourselves. This isn't about my feelings. It's about standards. The manager swallowed, trying to find a response. Can we make this right? Ken zipped his laptop case. You had your chance. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He walked out of the suite slowly, taking one last look at the space that would soon be nearly empty. Conference signage still hung. Coffee urns sat untouched. A balloon arch leaned in the corner. It all felt staged for a moment that would never happen. When Ken stepped in the lobby, staff watched in uneasy silence. The woman from earlier glanced toward him, but didn't speak. The man with the walkie-talkie was nowhere in sight. Ken walked straight out the doors and into a waiting black SUV. The driver opened the door. Ken slid inside. His phone buzzed instantly. More messages. More coordination. More questions he didn't need to answer. But something else was happening too. People were watching, and they would talk. Not because of drama, but because of what quiet leadership looks like when dignity is tested. By the time the Redwood Suites' first tray of pastries arrived, half the attendees were already blocks away. Inside the Harbor Grand, staff greeted every guest with warmth and clear direction. They didn't need to be told who Ken was. They recognized him. They respected him without confirmation. Across town, the original hotel's front desk was in chaos. Calls flooded in. Guests canceled keys. Suites emptied. Housekeeping reported deserted rooms. Catering asked whether they should even bother setting up the buffet. The receptionist stared at her computer screen, scrolling through reservations that were evaporating in real time. Gina, she whispered into the phone. The conference guests are leaving. Leaving? What do you mean leaving? Some checked out. Some walked out without a word. They just said talk to Mr. Turner. The manager's phone lit up next. Sir, Turner Innovations has canceled all bookings. The suites, the meeting rooms, everything. No lawsuit, no threats. Just a clean cut. A quiet downfall. While that hotel scrambled, Ken stood in the grand atrium of the Harbor Grand. The energy here was different, warm, reflective, respectful. Thank you for your flexibility, he told the crowd as they settled. I know the sudden change wasn't easy. I chose that previous venue for convenience. Good reviews. Professional reputation. This morning reminded me that a polished lobby doesn't guarantee respect. He let that sit. I was told to wait outside twice. Not because they were busy, not because the room wasn't ready, but because they looked at me and saw someone who didn't fit the picture they had in their heads. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Not shock, recognition. I didn't respond with anger. I responded with movement. Because today's work deserved better. The audience nodded, not out of sympathy, out of respect. Riley watched from the back, arms crossed, proud. While applause rolled through the atrium, the other hotel tried to hold itself together as staff removed and used chairs, folded linens, and carried away trays of untouched food. Their manager held a formal termination notice in his hands. The guest we ignored, he said quietly into the phone. He was the event. But the day wasn't finished revealing its lessons. Not for Ken, and not for anyone listening. Ken walked through the quiet hallway toward his office. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected a muted evening sky. The building felt calmer than the hotel, more grounded, more intentional. He paused outside the conference room, where whiteboards were still covered with diagrams from the last planning session. Lines drawn in blue and green. Notes scribbled in different handwriting. People had built ideas here. Ideas that mattered. Riley followed him in silence, holding a mug that had chipped on one side when someone dropped it weeks ago and refused to throw it out. It had become his favorite. He took a sip and leaned against the doorway. You see everything that's going around online, Riley said. Comments, messages, people saying you handled it the right way. Ken nodded, but kept his eyes on the whiteboard. They left out the part where the valet ignored you, Riley added. They always leave something out. It does not matter, Ken said. People who understand will read between the lines. People who do not would have ignored the full story anyway. Riley set the mug down on a shelf. What matters is they saw how you carried yourself. Ken looked at him for a long moment before responding. They saw one scene. They do not see the years behind it. He stepped closer to the board and tapped the corner where a sticky note read, in simple handwriting, "People first." We built this place differently, he said. I do not want anyone to walk in here and feel like they had to prove they belonged. That is the difference, Riley replied. Ken gave a small nod and walked toward his office. He flicked off the hallway lights before stepping inside, but he paused at the doorway for a moment. Something was still turning in his mind. Something unfinished. Let's keep building, he said quietly. He meant it in more than one way. Before leaving for the night, he remembered one more thing he needed to do. One more conversation he needed to have. Not to explain himself, not to relive anything, but to make sure the next wave coming up behind him understood the weight and the gift of moments like this. He pulled out his phone and sent a short message to someone who had been waiting for guidance without ever asking for it directly. Come to my office tomorrow morning, 8:30 sharp. The next day arrived with a gray sky that felt heavy but calm. Ken stood by the tall windows of his office. His coffee was warm, his collar open. The city was waking up slowly beneath him. Cars sliding past the crosswalk. A mother holding her child's hand. A delivery worker jogging across the street with a cardboard box balanced against his hip. Life moved, steady and unaware. A soft knock came at the door. Come in. The door opened and a young man walked in. Tyler, mid-20s. Smart. Good instincts. Still learning how to trust his own voice. He held a folder in his hands, but did not sit until Ken motioned to the chair across from him. You wanted to see me? Tyler asked. Yes. Have a seat. Tyler sat carefully, placing the folder on his lap without opening it. His shoulders were stiff the way people sit when they're not sure if they are in trouble or being promoted. I heard what happened to the hotel, he said. People were talking about it yesterday. Ken nodded, letting him continue. I wanted to ask you something, Tyler said. How do you stay so calm when the disrespect is that clear? How do you not snap? Ken set his coffee down. You think I was calm? Tyler blinked. Weren't you? No. I simply did not let them see anything that would feed their assumptions. Tyler leaned forward. Then how did you keep it together? Ken turned his gaze back to the window for a moment. When I was your age, he said, I walked into an interview with a resume that should have spoken for me. GPA, summer jobs, projects. I walked in hoping they would see the work. The receptionist asked if I was dropping off lunch. Tyler lowered his eyes. I waited 2 hours, Ken continued. They forgot I was there. So why didn't you say something? Tyler asked. Because noise is not always power. Sometimes the strongest choice is the one that keeps you moving, not the one that keeps you fighting the same wall. Tyler looked up slowly. But this wasn't the same as that, he said. This was an entire hotel. A whole event. Which is exactly why I left, Ken replied. Because if I stayed and begged for dignity, those watching would have learned the wrong lesson. They needed to see that I have the right to walk away from spaces that refuse to recognize me. Tyler let the words settle. It changed something in him, even if he did not show it. Ken sat back and folded his hands. You cannot stop people from misjudging you. You cannot control their flaws, but you can control the spaces you build. Make sure those spaces never make anyone else feel like you did. Tyler nodded, his voice softer. Thank you For what? For showing us a way forward that does not require shouting. Ken tapped the folder Tyler had brought. What is this? New proposal from the behavioral data team. We updated it based on your notes. Good. Let's go through it with the team later today. Tyler stood to leave, but paused at the door. You know, he said, people are looking at you differently after yesterday. Ken smiled faintly. They always saw me. They just never expected me to be the one signing the checks. Tyler left the office. Outside, the city hummed as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But something had shifted. The people who witnessed the story would not forget it. Not because it was loud, but because it revealed something quiet and unshakable. A kind of leadership that refuses to bow or break. A kind of strength that moves without raising its voice. A kind of clarity that rewrites the rules simply by choosing a different door. He watched Elijah leave the office, and for a moment the quiet settled around him like a weight he finally understood. Not a burden, a responsibility. He turned back toward the window. The city moved as if nothing extraordinary had happened, but he knew better. Ripples had started, the kind that travel through doors people rarely see and conversations people rarely record. Because stories like his didn't stay still. They traveled. They lingered. They became reminders in rooms where the truth often arrived late. That evening, while most of the building began to empty, Ken stayed behind. He read through proposals, signed off on budgets, and answered messages from partners who suddenly wanted to schedule meetings they delayed for weeks. Some wrote messages full of approval. Some wrote messages full of shock. Some wrote messages full of the kind of silence that wasn't silence at all. He answered none of them. He believed in his work more than the applause that followed it. And tonight, the work still needed him. Riley walked by his office on the way out. Heading home, Riley said, "Need anything before I go?" Ken shook his head. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long one." Riley gave a small nod and paused. "People are talking," he said, "but they aren't talking about the hotel. They're talking about how you handled it." Ken let out a slow breath. "Handling it isn't the goal," he said. "Changing the pattern is." Riley looked like he wanted to say more, but instead just nodded again and left quietly. Ken closed his laptop and stood, stretching his shoulders. He grabbed his coat and walked toward the elevators, feeling the weight in his chest ease just a little. When the elevator doors opened, a security guard stepped out and greeted him with a respectful nod. "Evening, Mr. Turner. Everything all right?" "Everything's fine." He meant it. He stepped into the elevator and rode down alone, listening to the soft hum. When the doors opened into the lobby, the building felt warmer than it had that morning. The receptionist waved. "Have a good night, Mr. Turner." "You too." Outside, the air was cooler. The streetlights flicked on, washing the sidewalk in a pale glow. Cars passed by in steady streams. Somewhere, music played faintly from a nearby restaurant. He walked to his car, unlocked it, sat inside without starting the engine. He rested his hands on the wheel and let the hush of the moment fill the space. He thought of the 19-year-old version of himself waiting in a lobby that had forgotten him. He thought of every moment since that had tried to shrink him. He thought of every young professional watching him now, looking for a blueprint they could trust. He turned the engine on. This wasn't the end. It was the door he had walked through to the next chapter. The rest of the city didn't know it yet, but the summit they almost hosted would become a story whispered in conference rooms for years. Not because of scandal, not because of outrage, because a man chose dignity over spectacle, principle over convenience, action over noise, and people noticed. By the end of the week, 2 more hotels reached out privately. 3 corporate partners requested meetings. A recruiter from a major firm sent a congratulatory message that carefully avoided mentioning the incident but referenced exceptional leadership under pressure. And quietly, without public statements, the original hotel's regional director launched an internal review. They didn't announce it. They didn't advertise it. But change sometimes begins with a conversation whispered behind closed doors because someone finally felt the consequences of staying silent. A month later, the ripples reached an even further corner. Ken was invited to speak at a leadership forum in Los Angeles. He wasn't told why at first, only that the organizers believed he had something important to say about power, respect, and the culture of modern work. When he arrived at the venue, a young woman with a clipboard met him at the door. "Mr. Turner, we're honored you're here." She said it without hesitation, without surprise, without doubt. "Thank you," he replied. She led him down a hallway, past empty chairs and a stage still being set up. The walls were lined with portraits of past speakers, CEOs, founders, innovators. She stopped beside him. "Before you go in, I just want to tell you something," she said. "A few weeks ago, someone forwarded me the story of what happened at the hotel in Oakland. I read the whole thing. Twice." Ken listened quietly. "My father went through things like that. And my brother. And it meant something to see a different ending." Ken didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. "You didn't yell," she said. "You didn't argue. You didn't try to prove anything to anyone. You just made a decision and walked forward. That taught me something. So thank you. Truly." Ken gave a small nod, feeling the weight in his chest shift again. Lighter this time. He walked into the green room, set his notes down, sat for a moment in the quiet. He thought about his father's words. "You can't force people to see you, but you can choose where you won't disappear." He had chosen well, and now others were choosing with him. Later, when he stepped onto the stage and the room rose in applause, he didn't think of the hotel. He didn't think of the receptionist or the valet or the manager who tried to apologize too late. He thought of every young Elijah listening, every confused receptionist who might one day hesitate before making an assumption, every leader who might choose dignity the next time it counted. He began with a simple sentence. "Thank you for being here. I want to talk about what it means to know your worth before anyone else does." The room fell silent, and for the first time in a long time, he felt the world catching up to a lesson he had carried alone for far too many years. If his story reached you, if it made you think about who you are in the rooms that doubt you, if it reminded you that quiet strength has a power of its own, carry it forward, share it, live it, because sometimes the loudest message you ever send is the moment you decide to walk away from a place that never deserved you. And that is how one man shut down an entire company without raising his voice.